A quick heads up before we dive into this week's episode. I've got great news. Sovereignty opens next week. I'm really excited about it. If you have been feeling ready to change the patterns you recognize, if you want to change them instead of just understanding them, this might be for you. You can hop on the wait list at staceyherrera.com/SOV like Victor waitlist and be the first to know when enrollment opens. There will be an early bird discount, so get on the list. Again, that is staceyherrera.com/SOV like Victor waitlist. Have you ever met someone that you just knew was genuinely good? Like they were kind, consistent, available, and instead of feeling excited, you just didn't feel anything. Or maybe you felt restless or uncomfortable or like something has to be wrong with them. If you've ever caught yourself pulling away from good love and heading straight for the hills of it's complicated, if you somehow feel more at home in chaos than in calm, this episode is for you. Because today we're unpacking 7 reasons why complicated feels more familiar than good. More importantly, we're talking about what to do in those moments when you feel yourself pulling or backing away from something real, right? So I'm going to get right into it. So, reason number 1, and these are in no particular order. Reason number 1, drama was your first love language. Maybe you grew up where love and chaos lived together, hand in hand, arm in arm, where the only time you felt truly connected was during a crisis. And in that kind of environment, your brain learns that drama is what matters. You learn that this is connection. And so, of course, calm might make you feel empty, right? A lot of us have grown up in that kind of environment, myself included. There was a lot of chaos and drama in my childhood home, and that was normal. In fact, I did not realize I didn't realize that wasn't normal until I was probably in my 30s. So yeah, that's reason number 1. Reason number 2, your body is waiting for the other shoe to drop. When things get quiet, when there is no emotional storm to weather, that's often when the anxiety kicks in. Your body is literally waiting for the other shoe to drop. But here's the thing. At first, feeling safe might make you feel sick. Like when there is no chaos, when there is no emotional upheaval, it might literally make you feel sick. Your stomach might churn, your shoulders might tense up, and that's not a sign that something is wrong. It's just your body being in unfamiliar territory because, again, if drama was your first love language, then calm feels scary, right? Reason number 3, you get really good. In fact, you get fluent at reading emotional weather. You learn to spot the emotional storms before they hit. You know how to manage moods that aren't your own. You know how to translate silence into warning signals. And you got really good at handling complicated people, so much so that straightforward people almost feel boring. It's like your skills aren't needed. I'm one of those people. I'm really good. I'm really good at reading the emotional room. It works really well in my job. It works really well as a coach, but that skill was born. It was an adaptation that came from dysfunction. And if you're nodding, I know you can relate. You're not alone. But let's keep going. Reason number 4, you know the highs and the lows. Can we get real? There's something electric, like a physical feeling that comes from emotional storms. And when you're used to relationships that feel like a roller coaster, smooth roads feel like nothing is happening. I remember years ago, quite a long time ago, I was dating this guy, and every conversation felt like an emotional expedition. I mean, the ups were so high, and the connection was so intense. Oh my goodness. It was like it was like literally I could feel um it was such a potent physical sensation whenever we would have like these really high highs. And it was exhausting, but at the time, it was like, at least I'm feeling something, right? And then and then I met someone who just showed up. No games, no drama, no dramatic revelations. And at first that felt flat. It felt empty almost. But here's what I learned. Real connection has its own intensity. Those conversations where you just feel seen, not because you're managing a crisis, but because both of you choose to go deep. You know, when someone gets you without you having to explain every little detail, or when someone matches your depth instead of your drama, it's like it's like switching from coffee to green tea. Like your nervous system just kind of settles down. And at first it feels like something is missing. But then you start noticing these subtle notes of quiet warmth, I guess. This steady energy that doesn't crash. You know how the afternoon coffee dip, right? The caffeine dip, that doesn't exist. It's just a different kind of aliveness. When you're in a container with somebody that doesn't need to stir the pot all the time. Took me quite a while to have that experience, by the way. I'm grateful to be on the other side sometimes because sometimes I'm the one feeling compelled to cause the drama just because of what I'm talking about. That absence of chaos, it's palpable. You can feel it. And even now, after doing all these work, even now after doing all this work, I sometimes, I sometimes feel myself wanting to start some shit. So let's go on. Reason number 5. The unknown feels like home. Isn't it wild how sometimes uncertainty, which is the bane of the human existence, but sometimes that feels like home. When things are just ambiguous and you don't know where you stand, but that's somehow when you know exactly what to do. You've got your emotional toolbox ready, your radar is up, your defenses are in place because being in that space of uncertain chaos is so normal that it feels like home because that's what home felt like. One of my clients put it perfectly. She said, I feel most comfortable when I'm uncomfortable. That's because she had spent 20 years in a marriage where she never knew who her husband was going to be when he walked through the door, which was very much like her childhood because her mother was very hot and cold. And so she caught herself like creating problems just to feel that familiar edge of uncertainty. And so, even though, again, uncertainty is the bane of the human existence, it's like we want to know what's going to happen. We want to know what's going to happen. We are always trying to predict the future. However, sometimes we are so comfortable in chaos that we know what to do. And therefore, the uncertainty of someone else's mood can feel certain because at least you know how to bob and weave and navigate it, right? And then when someone shows up consistently, means what they say, and knows what they want, and is comfortable expressing it, what are you supposed to do with that? When there's no emotional mystery to solve and no hidden meanings to decode, no in between the lines to read, who are you then? Sometimes the hardest part isn't finding good love, it's letting ourselves get used to it, right? Number 6, reason number 6. Love was always something you needed to earn. If you spent years being the one who understands, who waits, who works for love. The idea that it could be simple might feel wrong to you. When someone offers love freely with, again, no decoding, no fixing, it almost feels like a trick. And this is something that I see all the time, even with, women of a certain age, women our age in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. They've spent decades being the emotional heavy lifters, the ones who make it work through sheer force and will, right? And then they meet someone who matches their effort, someone who shows up without being asked, someone who loves without making them prove that they deserve it. And you know what they do? Freeze. It's like they're being handed something precious and they're just not trusting their hands to be able to hold it. The other day, a woman told me about a new relationship that she's in, and she said, "He just loves me. No condition, no test, no hoops to jump through." And it was freaking her out. It was freaking her out. It freaked her out more than any of the toxic relationships in her past ever did. Because when love is earned, when that's what you learn from the adults around you as a child, when you learn that you have to work for it, that you got to prove that you're worthy of it, then being loved freely, it feels like you're breaking a rule that you didn't even know you were following. And the number seven reason why complicated might feel more comfortable than calm is because let me just give you a little story. It took me years to see this, but when we're caught up in someone else's chaos, we don't have to show our own heart. When we are managing someone else's complications, we don't have to be vulnerable ourselves. Let me put it another way. When you're constantly putting out emotional fires, there is no time for anyone to ask you the real questions. There's no space for them to see beneath your strength, your armor, your competence, your having it all together. A few years ago, I had a client, let's call her Marie, and she'd spent her whole life dating men who needed fixing. Artists who couldn't get their acts together, small business owners who couldn't commit to anything except their dreams, men with potential who never quite got there. And she was their rock, their compass, their emotional support system. And then she met this guy who had his shit together, who asked her how she was doing and actually waited for the real answer. He didn't shy away. He wasn't accepting fine. He wanted to know what her dreams were. He wanted to know about her fears. He wanted to know what kept her awake at night. And then suddenly she realized why steady had always felt so threatening, because it meant that she'd be seen. And really being seen, as much as she craved it, as much as she longed for it, it scared the shit out of her. See, it's easier to be needed than to be known. And it's easier to handle someone else's baggage than to unpack our own. When we are busy managing drama, we get to stay safely behind our ability to handle all the bullshit. We get to be the strong one, the wise one, the one who has all the answers. But real love asks us to be seen in our entirety, in our wholeness, not just in our strength, but in our softness, our wisdom, our wounds, our ability to handle everything, and our need to be held sometimes. That's the real risk. Not that they'll leave, but that they'll stay. Not that they'll need us too much, but that they'll love us exactly as we are. Hmm. That's a lot. That's a lot. So what do we do with all this? What do we do with all this? Here's a simple but powerful tool that I like to call the 5-second pause. But before I explain it to you, let me tell you about Sarah. Again, not her real name. She had been dating this guy. He was a good guy. They were dating for about 3 months. And then she started to get that itch. The one where everything he does is wrong. He's too consistent, he's too simple, he's too everything. He just has too much time on his hands. He's always in my face, that kind of thing. And then one night he sent her this really sweet text message, just thinking of you. And she wanted to pick it apart. She pointed out that he always texted at the same time. She questioned if he was just going through the motions because he was too punctual. And that wasn't something that was new. That had come up before. That was something that he was constantly having to prove and explain why he was so into her. But this time she caught herself and she took 5 seconds. She just sat with that discomfort. She sat in the uncomfortable feeling. And in those 5 seconds, she realized that she wasn't anxious about him. She was anxious about how safe he felt. Of course, she didn't magically stop feeling anxious, but for those 5 seconds, it gave her enough space to respond to his text and not to her fear. See, her fear was telling her to pick apart what his text meant. Her fear was the reason that she felt like he was just going through the motions just because he was timely. But 5 seconds was all it took for her to pause long enough to choose a different response. That's what those 5 seconds can do. They can give you enough space to choose, to notice what's really happening. You might still make the same choice, and that's okay. The point isn't to force yourself to choose differently. The point is to notice that you have a choice. And some of y'all are out there thinking 5 seconds, that ain't nothing. But trust me, when every cell in your body is screaming for what's familiar, 5 seconds can feel like forever. And that's a perfect segue because that's exactly what sovereignty is about. Because I've been there. I know what it's like to choose chaos over calm. And me knowing didn't stop me from choosing it, by the way. And in sovereignty, we're going to move beyond understanding because, like you, I understood what I was doing. I understood why I was doing it. I even knew where it was coming from. And I was still choosing the same thing. Still choosing the same thing. But in sovereignty, we are going to move from understanding to choosing differently, not because the old way was wrong, but because maybe we're ready for something new. If you are feeling ready to move beyond understanding your patterns to actually changing them, the wait list is open. The doors are going to be opening soon. And this is a 4-month journey for women who are done with just knowing why and ready to have a different experience. But for this week, I just want you to try the 5-second pause just once. It might show up differently for you also. When you feel that urge to test someone's love or their commitment to you by pulling away or picking a scab, 5-second pause. Before you send a text message questioning why they're too nice, pause for 5 seconds. If you catch yourself looking for problems in something good, it doesn't even have to be relationship related. It could just be something that's, something good for yourself. It could be a song that made you feel wonderful. It could be something that tasted delicious. If you just catch yourself looking for something wrong with something when there's nothing obviously wrong, pause for 5 seconds. Before you dismiss a genuine connection as boring, pause for 5 seconds. Just see what happens when you give yourself that tiny space between the urge and the action, between the pattern and the choice. Because love is letting good feel good. We don't need to turn away from sweetness just because it's unfamiliar. Instead, we can learn to trust it, breath by breath, pause by pause. Until next time, I love you.